Reporter, it's Mrs. Curry here again. Today we're going to be reading chapters 7 and 8 of BFG. So this time we're going to read one of my favorite chapters. And I love this chapter because when you watch it in the movie, it's even better. Today we have 3 vocabulary words and one of them is really, really long. So our first vocabulary word is called forlorn. Can you say the word forlorn? Great job. Do you see this guy? It means miserable or unhappy. And this little guy, he kind of looks miserable and unhappy. Our next word is transfigured. Can you say the word transfigured? Great job. It means changing in outward appearances. So, like a superhero changes into their superhero costume, that's what transfigured means. And our last word is really, really long, okay? So yesterday when we did our Zoom, we had to practice saying it. It's called contemptuously. 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 It's a really long word, and it means disrespectfully. So if you're contemptuous, that means you're disrespectful. So I have it up on our board. I want you to pause the video and make sure you add it to your book, your vocabulary book today. So go ahead and pause our video right now so that you can make sure you get these down in your vocab book. Awesome job. So today we're going to be reading 2 new chapters. And our chapters today are called The Marvelous Ears and Snoz Cumbers. Your quick write for today is on page 11. And your quick write is, do you believe in anything that you can't see with your eyes? What is it? If you can't see it, how do you know it's true? So one of the things I was thinking about was wind. Do you guys know what wind is? Have you ever seen wind? But you can't see it, but you know it's there, right? You can feel it. You can see the trees moving. You can feel it on your body. You might feel that chill. You might not be able to see it, but you know it's true and you know it's there. So think about that while we are reading today. Okay. So today's chapters are a little bit longer, so we want to make sure that you're paying attention, okay? Chapter 7, The Marvelous Ears. Back in the cave, the big friendly giant sat Sophie down once again on the enormous table. It's quite snuggly in there, in your nightie? He asked. You isn't friggy cold? I'm fine, Sophie said. I cannot help thinking, said the BFG, about your poor mother and father. By now, they must be jipping and skumping all over the house, shouting, Hello, hello, where is Sophie gone? I don't have a mother and a father, Sophie said. They both died when I was a baby. Oh, you poor little scrumpet, cried the BFG. Is you not missing them very badly? Not really, Sophie said, because I never knew them. You is making me sad, the BFG said, rubbing his eyes. Don't be sad, Sophie said. No one is going to be worrying too much about me. That place you took me from the village orphanage, we are all orphans in there. You is an orphan? Yes. How many is there in there? 10 of us, Sophie said, all little girls. Was you happy there? BFG asked. I hated it, Sophie said. The woman who ran it called Mrs. Clonkers, and if she caught you breaking any of the rules, like getting out of bed at night or not folding up your clothes, you got punished. How was you getting punished? BFG said. She locked us in the dark cellar for a day and a night without anything to eat or drink. That rotten Rotspur, cried the BFG. It was horrid, Sophie said. We used to dread it. There were rats down there. We could hear them creeping about. That filthy old Bizwiggler, shouted the BFG. That is the horridest thing I was hearing for years. You was making me sadder than ever. All at once, a huge tear that would have filled a bucket rolled down one of BFG's cheeks and fell with a splash on the floor. It made quite the puddle. Sophie watched with astonishment. What a strange and moody creature this is, she thought. One moment he's telling me my head is full of squash flies, and the next moment his heart is melting for me because Mrs. Clonkers locks us in the cellar. The thing that worries me, Sophie said, is having to stay in this dreadful place for the rest of my life. The orphanage was pretty awful, but I wouldn't have been there forever, would I? All is my fault, the BFG said. I is the one who kid-snatched you. Yet another enormous tear welled from his eyes and splashed onto the floor. Now that I come to think of it, I won't actually be here all that long, Sophie said. I is afraid you will, said the BFG. No, I won't, Sophie said. Those brutes out there are bound to catch me sooner or later and have me for tea. I is never going to let that happen, BFG said. For a few moments the cave was silent. Then Sophie said, May I ask you a question? The BFG wiped the tears from his eyes with the back of his hand and gave Sophie a long, thoughtful stare. Shoot away, he said. Would you please tell me what you were doing in our village last night? Why you were there poking that long trumpet thing into the Gucci children's bedroom and then blowing through it? Aha! Cried the BFG, sitting up suddenly in his chair. Now he's getting nosier than a Parker. And the suitcase you were carrying, Sophie said. What on earth is that all about? The BFG stared suspiciously at the small girl sitting cross-legged on the table. You was telling me you whoopsie big secrets, he said. Secrets that nobody has ever hearing before. I won't tell a soul, Sophie said. I swear it. How could I anyway? I'm stuck here for the rest of my life. You could be telling the other giants. No, I couldn't, Sophie said. You told me they would eat me up the moment they saw me. And so they would, said the BFG. You is a human being, and human beings is like strawbunkles and cream to those giants. If they are going to eat me the moment they see me, then how would I have time to tell them anything? Sophie said. You wouldn't, said the BFG. Then why did you say I might? Because I am brimful of buzzburgers, the BFG said. If you listen to everything I'm saying, you'll get an earache. Please tell me what you're doing in our village, Sophie said. I promise you can trust me. Would you teach me how to make an elephant? The BFG asked. What do you mean? Sophie said. I would dearly love to have an elephant to ride on, the BFG said dreamily. I would love so much to have a jumbly big elephant and go riding through the green forest, picking peachy fruits off the trees all day long. This is a hot, sizzling, mud-funking country that we're living in. Nothing growing in it except for snozcumbers. I would love to go somewhere else and pick some peachy fruits in the early morning from the back of an elephant. Sophie was quite moved by this curious statement. Perhaps one day we'll get you an elephant, she said, and peachy fruits as well. Now tell me, what were you doing in our village? You would really want to know what I am doing in your village. I was blowing a dream into the bedroom of those children. Blowing a dream? Sophie said. What do you mean? I is a dream-blowing giant, the BFG said. When all the other giants is galloping off every wet way in which to swallow human beings, I is scuttling away to other places to blow dreams into the bedrooms of sleeping children. Nice dreams, lovely, golden dreams, dreams that has given the dreamers a happy time. Now hang on a minute, Sophie said. Where do you get these dreams from? I collect them, the BFG said, waving his arms toward the rows and rows of bottles on the shelves. I has billions of them. You can't collect a dream, though, Sophie said. A dream isn't something you can catch hold of. Oh, please. You is never going to understand about it, the BFG said. That is why I is wishing not to tell you. Oh, please tell me, Sophie said. I will understand. Go on. Tell me how you collect dreams. Tell me everything. The BFG settled himself comfortably in his chair and crossed his legs. Dreams, he said, is a very mysterious thing. They is floating around in the air like little wispy, misty bubbles, and all the time they is searching for sleeping people. Can you see them? Sophie asked. Never at first. Then how is it you catch them if you can't see them? Aha, said the BFG. Now we is getting on to the dark and dusky secrets. I won't tell a soul. I is trusting you, said the BFG. He closed his eyes and sat quite still for a moment, while Sophie waited. A dream, he said, with a big deep breath. As it goes, whiffling through the night air, is making tiny little buzzing humming noises. But this little buzzy hum is so silvery soft, it is impossible for a human being to hear it. Can you hear it? Sophie said. The BFG pointed up his enormous truck-wheeled ears, from which he now began to move in and out. He performed this exercise proudly, with a little proud smile on his face. Is you seeing these? He asked. How could I miss them? Sophie said. They may be looking a bit preposterous to you, the BFG said, but you must believe me when I say that they are very extra usual ears indeed. They is not to be coughed at. I'm quite sure they're not, Sophie said. They is allowing me to hear absolutely every single twiddly little thing. You mean you can hear things that I can't? Sophie said. You is as deaf as a dumpling compared to me, cried the BFG. You is hearing only thumping loud noises with all those little earwigs of yours, and I am here hearing all the secret whisperings of the world. Such as what? Sophie asked. There's BFG with his really big ears. There's Kona making an appearance. She's our new dog here. In your country, he said, I is hearing the footsteps of the ladybird as she goes walking across the leaf. Honestly? Sophie said, beginning to be impressed. What's more is I is hearing those footsteps really loud, the BFG said. When a ladybird is walking across a leaf, I is hearing her foot go clumpity clumpity clump, like a giant's footsteps. Good gracious me, Sophie said. What else can you hear? I is hearing the little ants chittering to each other as they scuttle around the soil. You mean you can hear ants talking? Every single word, said the BFG, although I is not exactly understanding their language. Go on, Sophie said. Sometimes, on a very clear night, the BFG said, and if I is swiggling my ears in the right direction, and here he swiveled his great ears upwards so they were facing the ceiling. If I is swiggling them like this, and the night is very clear, I is sometimes hearing faraway music coming from the stars in the sky. A queer little shiver passed through Sophie's body. She sat very quiet, waiting for more. My ears is what told me that you were watching me out of your window last night, the BFG said. But I didn't make a sound, Sophie said. I was hearing your heart beating across the road, the BFG said. It was as loud as a drum. Go on, Sophie said, please. I can hear plants and trees. Do they talk? Sophie said. They is not exactly talking, the BFG said. They is making noises. For instance, if I come along and I is picking a lovely flower, if I is twisting the stem of the flower till it breaks, then the plant is screaming. I can hear it screaming and screaming very clear. You don't mean it, Sophie cried. How awful. It is screaming like you'd be screaming if someone was twisting your arm off, right? Is that really true? That Sophie asked. You think I is fist-figgling you? It is rather hard to believe. Then I is stopping right here, said the BFG. I is not wishing to be called a fibster. Oh, no, I'm not calling you anything, Sophie cried. I believe you, I do, really, please, go on. The BFG gave her a long, hard stare. Sophie looked right back at him, her face open to his. I believe you, she said softly. She had offended him, and she could see that. I would never be fibbling to you, he said. I know you wouldn't, Sophie said, but you must understand that it isn't easy to believe such an amazing thing straight away. I understand that, said the BFG. So please forgive me and go on, she said. He waited a little longer, and then he said, It is the same with trees as it is with flowers. If I am chopping an axe into a trunk of a big tree, I is hearing a terrible sound coming from the inside of the heart of the tree. What sort of sound? Sophie said. A soft moaning sound, the BFG said. It's like the sound an old man is making when he's slowly dying. He paused. The cave was very silent. Trees is living and growing just like you and me, he said. They is alive. So is plants. He was sitting very straight in his chair now, his hands clasped tightly close together in front of him. His face was bright, his eyes were round and bright as two stars. Such wonderful and terrible sounds I is hearing, he said. Some of you would never wish to be hearing yourself, but some is like glorious music. He seemed almost to be transfigured by the excitement of his thoughts. His face was beautiful in the blaze of emotions. Tell me some more about them, Sophie said. You ought to be hearing the little mices talking. Little mices is always talking to each other, and I is hearing them as loud as my own voice. What do they say? Sophie asked. Only the mices know that. Spiders is also talking a great deal. You might not be thinking it, but spiders is the most tremendous natterboxes. And when they is spinning their webs, they is singing all the time. They is swinging sweeter than a nightingale. Who else do you hear? Sophie asked. One of the biggest chatbags is the caterpillars, the BFG said. What do they say? They is always arguing all the time about who is going to be the prettiest butterfly. That is all they ever be talking about. Is there a dream floating around in here now? Sophie said. The BFG moved his great ears this way and that, listening intently. He shook his head. There is no dream in here, he said, except in the bottles. I has a special place to go for catching dreams. They is not often coming here to Giant Country. How do you catch them? The same way you is catching buttery flies, the BFG answered, with a net. He stood up, crossed the corner of the cave with a pole, was leaning against the wall. The pole was 30 feet long, and there was a net at the end of it. Here is a dream catcher, he said, grasping the pole in one hand. Every morning I is going out and snitching new dreams to put into my bottles. Suddenly, he seemed to lose interest in the conversation. I is getting hungry, he said. It is time for eats. Chapter 8, Snozcumbers. Remember, this is one of my favorite chapters, especially when you watch the movie. But if you don't eat people, like all the others, Sophie said, then what do you live on? That is a squelching, tricky problem around here, the BFG answered. In this slosh-flunking giant country, happy eats like pineapples and pigwinkles is simply not growing. Nothing is growing except for one extremely icky poo vegetable. It's called the snozcumber. The snozcumber? Cried Sophie. There's no such thing. The BFG looked at Sophie and smiled, showing about 20 of his square white teeth. Yesterday, he said, we was not believing in giants, was we? Today, we is not believing in snozcumbers. Just because we happen not to have actually seen something with our own two little winkles, we think it is not existing. What about, for instance, the great squizzly Scotch hopper? I beg your pardon, said Sophie. Or the humplecrimp? What's that? Sophie said. And the rascal? The what? Sophie said. The crumpscottle? Are they animals? Sophie asked. They is common animals, the BFG said contemptuously. I is not a very giant myself, but it seems to me that you are absolutely no-nothing human being. Your brains is full of rotten wool. You mean cotton wool? Sophie said. What I mean and what I say is two different things, the BFG announced. I will now show you a snozcumber. The BFG flung open a massive cupboard and took out the weirdest looking thing that Sophie had ever seen. It was about half as long as an ordinary man, but it was much thicker. It was thick around his girth as a perambulator. It was black with white stripes along its length. It was covered all over in coarse knobbles. Look how big it is. It's like the size of a grown man. Here is the repulsant snozcumber, cried the BFG, waving it about. I squoggle it, I mispies it, I dispunge it. But because I is refusing to gobble up human beings like the other giants, I must spend my life guzzling up icky poo snozcumbers instead. If I don't, I will be nothing but skin and groans. You mean skin and bones? Sophie said. I know it is bones, BFG, but please understand that I cannot be helping if I sometimes is saying things a little squiggly. I is trying my very best for all the time. The big friendly giant just looked suddenly so forlorn, and Sophie got quite upset. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to be rude. There's never any schools here to teach me talking in giant country, the BFG said. But couldn't your mother have taught you? Sophie asked. My mother? Cried the BFG. Giants don't have mothers. Surely you is knowing that. I did not know that, Sophie said. Whoever heard of a woman giant? Shouted the BFG, waving the snozcumber around his head like a lasso. There is never a woman giant, and there will never be one. Giants is always men. In that case, how were you born? Sophie asked. Giants isn't born, the BFG answered. Giants appears, and that's all there is to it. They simply appears, the same way the sun and the stars. And when did you appear? Sophie asked. Now how on earth could I be knowing of such a thing like that? It was so long ago I couldn't count. You mean you don't even know how old you are? No giant is knowing that, the BFG said. All I is knowing about myself is that I is very old. Very, very, very old and crumply. Perhaps old as the earth. What happens when a giant dies? Sophie asked. Giants is never dying, the BFG answered. Sometimes. And quite suddenly, a giant is disappearing, and nobody is ever knowing where he goes to. But mostly, us giants is simply going on and going on like whistly time twiddlers. The BFG was holding the awesome snozcumber in his right hand, and now he put one end into his mouth and bit off a huge chunk. He started crunching it up, and the noise he made was like crunching lumps of ice. "It's filthy," he spluttered, speaking with his mouth full and spraying large pieces of snozcumber like bullets in Sophie's direction. Sophie hopped up around on the table, ducking out of its way. "It's disgustorous," the BFG gurgled. "It's sickable. It's rotsome. It's maggot-wise. Try yourself, this foulsome snozcumber." "No, thank you," Sophie said. "Well, it's all you're gonna be eating. You're gonna be guzzling around here from now on, so you might as well get used to it," said the BFG. "Go on, you snipsy little winkle. Have a go." Sophie took one nibble. "Ugh," she sputtered. "Oh no, oh gosh, oh help." She spat it out so quickly. "It tastes of frog skin," she gasped, "and rotten fish." "Worse than that," cried the BFG, roaring with laughter. "To me it's tasting of clock coaches and slime wranglers." "Do we really have to eat it?" Sophie said. "You do, unless you just want to become so thin you'll just be disappearing into a thick ear." "You mean into thin air," Sophie said. "A thick ear is something quite different." Once again, that sad, winsome look came into the BFG's eyes. "Words," he said, "oh, is such a tinkling problem to me all me life. So you must simply try to be patient and stop squibbling. As I'm telling you before, I know exactly what words I am wanting to say, but somehow or other they is always getting quiddled around." "That happens to everyone," Sophie said. "Not like it happens to me," said the BFG. "I speak in the most terrible Wiglish." "You think you speak beautifully? I think you speak beautifully," Sophie said. "You do?" cried the BFG. "You really do?" "Simply beautifully," Sophie repeated. "Well, that is the nicest present anyone has ever given to me in my whole life," cried the BFG. "Are you sure you're not twiddling my leg?" "Of course not," Sophie said. "I just love the way you talk." "How wondercrump!" cried the BFG, still beaming. "How whoopsie splunkers! How absolutely squiffling! I is all of a stutter." "Listen," Sophie said, "we don't have to eat snozcumbers. In the fields around our village there are all sorts of lovely vegetables, like cauliflowers and carrots. Why don't you get some of those next time you go visiting?" The BFG raised his great head proudly in the air. "I is a very honorable giant. I would rather be chewing up rotsome snozcumbers than snitching things from other people." "You stole me," Sophie said. "I did not steal you very much," the BFG said, smiling gently. "After all, you was only a tiny little girl." That is the end of chapter 8. If you're in my class, make sure that you're working on page 11 and 12 and upload them to Seesaw. If you're just here for story time, then welcome. I'll see you guys later. Bye.